I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Just what do you think you're doing, Dave?
Why, you stuck-up, half-witted, scruffy-looking nerf herder.
This means something.
I am Locutus of Borg.
I must not fear, and fear is the mind killer.
Get away from her, you
Nerd! Nerd!
I'm Matt Kressel.
And I'm David Mercurio Rivera.
And
this is
Nerd Count.
All right. We are here with Leanna Renee Hieber, and we are super excited to have Leanna with us.
Absolutely. You know, it's been a while since we've done our last. Actually, that's not true. I take that back. Our other recording should be coming out before this one. But we had a bit of a lull in our schedules.
We're trying to pack them all in now because we had a hiatus. If I'm counting correctly, this should be episode 19. Okay. Episode 18 is going to be our ReaderCon podcast. But Leanna, we've known Leanna for a while. I want to say that we met at Fantastic Fiction at KGB, but not certain that's the place. I've said this to other guests. I think David feels the same. There are some people that just feel like you've known them forever, so then you forget when you actually met them. Kindred spirit. But before we get into all the amazing things that you've done, David, please introduce our guest.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure to do so. And I will start by reading her amazing bio, which says that Leanna Renee Hieber is a professional actress, playwright, tour guide, and award-winning author of fiction and nonfiction for Tor, Kensington, Hatchet, and more. A Haunted History of Invisible Women, co-authored with Andrea Janes, was a Stoker Award nominee for Superior Achievement in Nonfiction, and their follow-up, America's Most Gothic Haunted History, Stranger Than Fiction, was an instant USA Today bestseller and also a Stoker nominee. Leanna's Gothic novel, Ravenfield Hall, releases February of 2027 from Hatchet. A 3-time Prism Award winner for her Gothic Strangely Beautiful saga, and a Daphne du Maurier finalist for Darker Still. Leanna's stories and essays have been featured in notable anthologies such as Queen Victoria's Book of Spells and magazines like Apex and The Deadlands. Featured on TV shows like Mysteries at the Museum and Beyond the Unknown, discussing Victorian spiritualism. She works for New York City's Boroughs of the Dead and tells ghost stories nationwide. Welcome, Leanna.
Thank you so much. It's so good to see you both. Yeah, Matthew, I think we have gone back. I think we're approaching 20 years, my friend. I do think it was KGB.
Yes.
And I think I started attending back in like 2007, like way before any of my books were, or anything was, before anything was a twinkle in the eye. And I was just new to New York, and I moved there in 2005. And you all were so welcoming right from the beginning. I'll never forget feeling welcomed, feeling excited. And so it's so incredible to still, almost 20 years later, still have that chance to feel just as welcome. And thank you for all you've done, because KGB has just been such a great space for so many people through the years. And it's just, I'm so glad that we're still able to just kind of like touch down here and there.
Yeah, I mean it's really been an amazing thing. Just all the people that we get to meet every month. It's like a little mini con every month, and you've been, I think, no small part of that.
You're such an amazing reader too. So compelling.
Yeah,
you put on a you don't just read. You put on a show.
That's my theater background coming in. Yes. It's one of those things where I'm like, all right, put me in, coach. Let me get up there. Because every time I talk with publicity, every time I'm discussing things about a new book, I'm like, let me do a reading. So I can't wait to be able to read the next book. So it's been one of those things where I love the chance to sort of get up on stage, because I kind of walked away from it because I chose my books over my career in theater. I still do theater, but theater's kind of in the background and writing is in the foreground. So anytime I get a chance to be a reader, thank you. Thank you for letting me get on stage.
Yeah, no, I mean, so we've known each other for a while, and one of the things, like you said, when you first started coming to the reading series, you were just kind of started getting into the writing world, and I've watched your career, and I've watched all the things that you've been doing, and just kind of dazzled by how prolific you are, how creative you are, and then also how well you have navigated the twists and turns of publishing. So that, there are some times when things didn't go so well with the publisher or something, and you took that in such stride, I remember. And what I'm excited to see, what I'm happy to see is how you've weathered that and then how you've come out the other side of that. Jeffrey Ford said, and I'm paraphrasing, don't, just keep your head down and write. That's all you can do. And eventually you'll come out the other side. And boy, did you come out the other side. Like, so but we want to get into all the work that you've done, but what we like to do is talk a little bit about your origins, if that's okay.
Your origin story.
Yes. So tell us how you became a superhero.
You grew up in Ohio, right?
Yeah, I was bitten by a radioactive Edgar Allan Poe.
Okay.
And so that pretty much tracks, actually. Yeah, it's I grew up in rural Ohio in the middle of nowhere, but my parents, my dad's an artist, my mom's a nurse, and what little money they had, they put together to take me to a good school. So I was in a kind of it was sort of like a Montessori school program, but it was a kind of a learn and progress at your own pace kind of school. So they quickly noted that I really liked large words and that I really liked 19th century stuff in a way that I was drawn to it in a way that they just found kind of creepy but fascinating. Because it wasn't like the Victorian style was something that was necessarily popular at the time. I mean, I was, growing up in the 80s, there was a bit of a resurgence of an understanding, like an appreciation 100 years on from like some of the Gothic classics. But I was a spooky kid. I just was drawn to that. My earliest memory is literally of telling a ghost story, making it up as I went along to scare my brownie Girl Scout troop. So I just felt an immense sense of power from there. So there's my superhero origin story is liking to scare my friends. And
you're still doing that.
I'm trying. But I'm also really interested now. It's the pairing that, like, I love scaring people, but I also really like the power of a friendly ghost. So much of my work when I'm telling ghost stories is also about talking about how the dead teach us how to be alive. And I do that as a ghost tour guide, taking people through historic spaces and saying, hey, here's weird stuff that's happened here. I try not to be, I try to make sure that we're putting first and foremost a respect for the dead when I'm telling a ghost story about somebody that really lived. So when I work with Burrows of the Dead, New York City's top ghost tour company, founded by Andrea Janes, my co-author in the nonfiction, that's our rule. First and foremost, respect for the dead. If you're talking about real people, if you're making it up, you get to do whatever you want. And so I've tried to strike the right balance my whole life of figuring out, when is this time for fiction? When is this time to be a storyteller as a playwright? When is this time to be a storyteller as an actress? When is this time to be a storyteller in nonfiction and as a historian? And so over the course of my career, both in theater, as a playwright, as an author of fiction and nonfiction, it all, interestingly enough, ties into my interest in historicity and in there being a speculative and spectral element. There's literally every single story I've written has some kind of spectral or ghostly element, whether it's a book, whether it's a short story. Ghosts have kind of just always been at the forefront. They're my through line. And so it's why I don't feel pulled in so many different directions, because the spectral has kind of like floated through the whole, they are my, the mist that pervades everything. And I feel that that's really what has been driving me since I was a kid, is just this desire to talk about the unknown and the undiscovered country without trying to tell people what to think about it. I love a good existential question. And I think that ghost lore really provides that, because it's the where and the how of a space and a place and who did live there and what might persist.
Right.
And then,
I was
so
going to
what?
say,
Yeah.
if you could tell us a little bit about your job as a tour guide, because I find that absolutely fascinating. Maybe it's something that I always have friends visiting from out of town, and I'd kind of be interested in taking that tour myself.
Absolutely. Burrowsofthedead.com is where
Mhm.
everybody can go. It's
Mhm.
if it's not me giving a tour, it's going to be one of my incredible colleagues. I have to say,
Mhm.
just to brag on the company a little bit, Andrea,
Mhm.
as a founder of the company, has assembled some of the best tour guides that I've ever had the pleasure of working with and around. Just spectacular people. And so the tour guide life is one of my earliest jobs. I did some guiding around my college campus. My first job, my first summer job, was at the Ohio History Center in Columbus, leading people around a World War II exhibit. And so I've always loved history. And so just any kind that just felt like a natural job for me to pursue as
Yeah.
someone who liked storytelling, who liked performing, who liked being able to talk about the written word and be able to present the written word. And the Ohio History Center also had a radio drama company. And so I got to do like A Christmas Carol as a radio drama, things like that. So I'd be drawn into work that was history storytelling.
Right.
And so then because of that job, when I moved to Minneapolis, out of college, I got a job as a lead actress doing repertory theater at a company called Commonweal. It's still out there in Lanesboro, Minnesota. And I was out there for about a year doing different shows and repertory. And I also did some tour guiding when I was out in Minneapolis. I stayed there for a few years. I really like the theater scene out there. It's a great town. The Twin Cities is a great artistic town. And so I was there doing theater and working as a ghost tour guide because I found a job working for a haunted cave. It was a haunted speakeasy, a 1920s speakeasy, because St. Paul was like Sin City during the rum running time of Prohibition. And so St. Paul was like this crime central, which is kind of fascinating now because it's a very quiet sort of, staid town comparatively now. But I found it just like working for a haunted speakeasy, which is really cool. And I had my own really wild haunted experiences in that cave.
I was
I
going
wrote
to
a
ask
whole
you whether
chapter about it.
you've had real life experiences
Oh,
with ghosts?
tons.
Tell us
So
a couple of them.
I will absolutely tell you some ghost stories. Yeah, so like in terms of just the trajectory of getting to New York, the writing and the ghost story stuff was all completely entwined, and also the being this performative storyteller, the tour guiding aspect, that had been pretty much my most consistent resume build. And then so when I moved to New York in 2005, I had just gotten my union card. I'm a member of Actors Equity and SAG-AFTRA. So that's both the performers unions of the television and film industry, as well as the stage union. So I had gotten my equity card and I was like, that's time to go to New York City. I knew I was going to go eventually. It was a matter of when. And so 2005, I was like, all right, got my equity card. I'm going to go. And then trying to think about what were the side hustles I was going to engage in as a new New Yorker. I knew I wanted to write about New York. I knew I wanted to set my next book, set them in New York, in historic 19th century New York, that I just felt so strongly about that. And so I started studying to get my tour guide's license. You do have to be licensed in New York City to be a tour guide. You have a license, you have to pass a pretty comprehensive test. And so I did a lot of studying. These were things I wanted to know anyway. So like for people, when I give people advice about like, side jobs within, trying to be a writer and XYZ, trying to make a living, I'm like, whatever you can do to double up on something. Like for me, learning about New York as a tour guide meant I was learning about New York as a writer who wanted to write about books set, in the city. So all of that stuff ended up being this kind of great double duty. And so within that, I started working for those ungodly double-decker buses, because that was the company that needed the most tour guides, because you kind of get burnt out on that job pretty quickly. So it's a kind of constant turnover. But I had my license and I had a great I had a great experience getting the lay of the land of the city that way, about being on the buses, even though it's a really grueling job to be under the sun, with people, sometimes with people who just don't actually care about the history that you are telling them. They just want to get from Times Square to Macy's, and they don't understand that you could walk there quicker than you can do that on a bus. But anyway, but anyway, that I digress. The layout of all of that gave me some experience, and then that way, when I actually did meet Andrea, now going on almost 12, almost 13 years ago, we were telling ghost stories at a bar in Brooklyn. And I was like, oh, hey, you have that ghost tour company. I have my license, and I would really like to, if I'm going to be a tour guide, I would really like to be doing my great love, which is telling ghost stories. So, and our visions really aligned with wanting there to be accurate history at the forefront and respect for the dead. No jump scares, none of that, nothing silly or over the top or too salacious just for the sake of it, or any of that kind of stuff that gets ghost tourism can get really kind of ugly and gross and gauche if you're not respectful about it. So I really liked her approach and continue to like her approach on all of that. We're very same page about that. And so all of the tour guiding stuff has been in the background of the publishing stuff. And that's also been a through line of being a performative storyteller. As a tour guide, you're obviously walking people through New York, and New York is the star. There's no competing against it. It's the star. You're just a supporting cast member. And that's really helped me as a writer in guiding readers through a story.
Yeah. So just going back briefly to before that, you have a BFA in theater, and you focused on the Victorian era. So it seems like you're talking a little bit about, merging all of your interests into this one thing. So you like performing, you're very curious about New York, you're very curious about ghosts, and I see this in your fiction, so that every time that you read fiction and then some of your nonfiction stuff, which has some fiction in it, there's a performance involved there, and it's always just super entertaining and fascinating, but also like emotionally poignant in a way that I am not always expecting. And then you have this way of drawing someone in, and then hitting them with that punch that like this is real. Like this is real. It's not something that I've crafted, but I did craft it, but it's also real. And that to me was just sort of just a wondrous thing to experience. And I'm just wondering if you could just talk a little bit about like the performance aspect of it. Because I mean, there are some writers that they get up there to do a reading, and they're reading like a very sort of monotone way, and that's fine. And then sometimes I'm like really pulled in because the story is amazing. But like some people just get up there and they're like performers. And I think you are in the latter area. And I just wanted to ask you a little bit about like, what is performance to you? Like, how do you see that like in your overall kind of body of creativity?
It's a great question. I knew when I was young that I wanted to be a writer as well as a performer. The performer part of me was the more public thing, the more extroverted part of me. So that's why I decided to be a theater major, because that was the thing that I was sort of known for publicly in my school growing up. That, okay, this is a big personality, a big energy. It's got to have somewhere to go. Put that on stage, please, because otherwise I just get obnoxious. Please give me an outlet. So that kind of big energy thing was really what drew me to performing. And then the writing part of me was really, really private. And I didn't necessarily think about writing, like becoming a novelist or that kind of stuff, because I didn't actually understand that business. I understood you audition for shows and then you go and you get a show and or you self-produce or whatever. I understood the mechanisms of theater a lot more than I understood the mechanisms of publishing. So once I started talking to people about the playwriting process as a professional actor, I did my very first published works were plays. And because those were the connections I was making. And the playwriting publishing industry is radically different, completely different group of people than fiction publishing is. However, it is nice to have something on your resume that does say you've been published by a traditional publisher. So that was a way in. And then I realized, oh, I need to network in the publishing world in a way that I would be networking with casting directors. And that also precipitated my move to New York, because I was like, well, the industry is there for both things I want to do, theater as well as publishing, and we're going to see who wins out. And so I don't know, I've never been able to extricate my performer self from my writer self. You will see it in my fiction. My fiction is also very theatrical. It is very often, it is big. It is, people are making big, bold choices. I'm very character driven because I'm an actor. I'm not a director. I'm not a producer. I'm an actor. So I'm very much interested in character dynamics. And sometimes that's been what I've had to work on is plot and action and pacing, because the character stuff is where I really love to be. And every single time that a draft of mine has gone wrong, it's because I'm looking more at an overarching thing, and I'm not diving into the character and making the strongest, most important choices for them. Anytime that I have really gone off the rails about a drafting process, it's because I've forgotten my own origin story, which is make these characters make the most interesting choices possible. Everything else will follow. And that was even the case with Ravenfield Hall, where I was kind of holding back. My upcoming book is a young adult novel, and it's a first person narrative. And this woman is a spiritualist. She's also a performer. She has a little bit of psychic gifts. So she's talking to the dead, but for the most part, she's kind of doing it as a trick to kind of get over on people, and as a way to survive at a time when women's incomes were very limited. So she is a performer that I was kind of holding back on. Okay, but what if there's a real gift in there and it needs to crack open? And so that was something that my editor in our first pass was like, you can give Agnes, your heroine, you can give her more agency. You can let her make the stronger acting choice. You don't have to hold back on that. I feel like you're holding her back. And that was like, it broke me open, because I let Agnes sort of come into a certain point of her power that I kind of wanted to do, but I wasn't quite sure if I had the permission to do. And so I think that that's just kind of the interesting thing, is that I'm still sometimes navigating how much is too much in that performative angle. And every single time, if I'm holding back from letting that character be the larger, bigger, dominant thing, that's actually where I go wrong. So again, it's good that I have these outlets. Otherwise, if I didn't have all this energy going somewhere, again, it would be really hard to deal with me.
So I'm curious. So you mentioned that you wrote a screenplay. Like, describe to me the moment where you're like, I'm going to sit down and write a short story. I'm going to write a novel. Like, do you remember that, or was it just a lifelong thing?
I started writing my first novel when I was about 12 years old. And it was pure fan fiction. It was a sequel to Andrew Lloyd Webber's Phantom of the Opera. I was obsessed with that show, and it was 1888 in the Paris Opera, and this was my time period. So like, people are like, what is it with the 19th century? And I'm like, I don't know. It's weird. It feels paranormal, my connection to it. I have memories of that time period. I was born in 1979. I didn't live in the late 19th century, but I feel like I did. So when people explained to me the concept of past lives, I was like, that's got to be it. Because otherwise, stuff's just uncanny. I would like see things that are 19th century construction, and it would feel familiar to me. I would sometimes be researching something that I was verifying about times and dates and whatever, and I'd actually already written it the way it actually was, and it's very validating when you sort of like psychically, anticipate an actual historical event. So those kind of uncanny parallels happened all the time. So the idea of the process of writing a book just felt like, well, this is what I'm doing in my spare time as a kid because I'm obsessed and I need an outlet. So I think that, you know, a lot of kids just start writing without any kind of idea of where is that going to lead? Is this going to be a profession or whatever? And I liked that my parents just were like, okay, great, you're writing. They didn't push me towards anything. They didn't say, okay, well, great, now it's time to monetize that hobby. Like, don't ever do that to your kids.
Yeah.
And they didn't, you know, they were just like, hey, this is good, great. You wanna be a writer? Here's more books. And they, you know, I was never policed in what I was reading. I read a whole bunch of stuff at age 8 that probably, like, I probably shouldn't have read it at age 8, but you know, I mean, we're of those. We're
Well,
of
how
that
much did you
generation,
understand of it?
I mean, it's just
Yeah.
enough to be like,
enough,
oh
yeah.
God, enough
Yeah.
to be like, growing up is going to be hard.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, it was like Flowers in the Attic. That should never have been like.
Oh, so many kids read that. Yeah, my sisters. Yeah.
Well, it's because the young adult when we were growing up, the young adult section didn't exist.
Right.
So we went from reading. I went from reading Nancy Drew to Stephen King.
Yeah.
Like, just that
Yeah.
was the pipeline, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, Carolyn Keene to Stephen King pipeline, right, for sure. And so I think that the idea of being a novelist was just like, oh well, this is just a thing that I also do in addition to these other things that I do. And the first time I thought about doing it professionally was when I was in college, and my college roommate was like, so you go to theater rehearsal and then you come back and you work on your novel. I was working on this Phantom of the Opera fan fiction for a really, really long time. You work on your book when you come back from your rehearsal process. You know, that also is what novelists do. So you might want to consider you're also maybe a novelist. And I was like, oh yeah, maybe I am a novelist. Okay. So it's just one of those interesting things. And I realized that if I was ever going to go forward with something, it needed to be not fan fiction. It needed to be my own work. So I just started thinking about, well, what are all my favorite things? And so I put together a list of my favorite things that all kind of blended together into what became Strangely Beautiful, the poster I have here on my wall, the revised edition of that, my debut novel, which is about Greek mythology, dark academia, ghosts, Victorian London at the time of Jack the Ripper, and prophecies and a love story. And you know,
do you still use the term gas lamp fantasy? Or
oh, absolutely,
not?
yes,
Okay,
absolutely. That term, gas lamp fantasy, did not exist as a term when I was first querying back in the early 2000s. That was a term, thankfully, that Tor, who published the revised edition of Strangely Beautiful, thankfully came up with that term to delineate
such a great term. Yeah,
from steampunk. Yeah, because people are like, oh, it's steampunk. I'm like, no, there's no gadget.
Right.
Steampunk's Victorian science fiction, for people who are curious about the delineation. Steampunk is Victorian set science fiction. If it is from the Victorian era, it's just science fiction. If it is steampunk, it is modern writers writing about a steam-powered era with science fiction elements. And then gaslamp fantasy is the setting of the gaslit era, but with fantasy elements solving the problems rather than sci-fi elements solving the problems. So yeah, purely gaslamp fantasy. And that's, I have another book coming out after Ravenfield Hall. I have another book coming out called Dead Ringer. That's purely gaslight fantasy again. Big cast of characters, New York City setting, a bunch of, you know, found family cast of characters, amateur sleuths coming together to solve both a murder and the ghost story attached to it and prevent another murder.
So I have a very, very important question to ask.
Okay.
You. Are you a pantser or are you a plotter?
I am a pantser who has had to learn elements of plotting to be able to sell a book. So yeah, pantser for life. But I do usually need a framework. And if I don't have a framework, I'll find myself going way off the rails really quickly. So I've tried to kind of, I've tried to make myself meet in the middle.
Yeah.
And at least make sure that I'm getting down sort of like the structural tent poles of a piece. And again, because I want to be able to sell things on proposal. If you want to be able to do that, you've got to have a solid outline. And these days, even for veteran writers, because editors don't have the time they ever used to have, and they're under increasing pressure, submitting a full manuscript is a better idea for everybody now anyway. Because getting a chance to sell on proposal it's a chance that a lot of editors aren't necessarily able to take because they're not sure if they're going to be able to do the developmental edits if they're not seeing what might need to be done out the gate.
It sounds good, but I need to see it in practice.
Right. Yeah. Even people that you worked with before. So it's like, that's just part of it. That's where we're at right now. So I'm trying to get better. about the structural. I'm trying to get better to being a plotter, but it is like pulling teeth every time. So you can
Yeah.
tell I'm very freeform. You can tell I'm a non-linear thinker. So
Right,
that is
right,
hard. That is hard sometimes when I'm trying to create structural works, whether that's a
Right.
play,
right.
whether that's a tour. I'm currently writing a tour for Boroughs of the Dead, a new tour. So I have to figure out the structural elements of how to get from point A to point B, literally on foot in the city.
Right.
So, that's a different level of 3D storytelling. That's a fascinating additional part of this. And I don't look at any one of these things as completely separate from the other. Each one of these things are how I approach a book, because I am a tour guide. So I do walk the paths. If there's an extant street still there, I will walk the paths that my characters walk. I really like to be a location based. I have been there. I've put my feet on that ground.
Yeah.
I'm not a full method actor about it, but I really like that sights and sounds and feeling and all the stuff that you can get when you're there in a space. So that is also being a tour guide, being in relationship to the environment around you and trying to make sure I'm leading the reader through in a way my stories have been called immersive in that regard, atmospheric in that regard. And I think it is why, because I am thinking about it as I am trying to take you through the theatrical experience that is this book.
Right. In terms of your process, we've had
Mhm.
so we had so many writers on this podcast so far, and looking at the number of books that you've published, for a lot of authors, we talk about, well, they've published 7 books or 8 books. In your case, we're talking about it's always trilogies. You have 6 trilogies or whatever or more sequences in the book. And I'm wondering, since you're so prolific, how do you do it? Do you have do you stick to a schedule of writing? What's your process in terms of when do you write? And do you write in a particular place?
I am pure chaos, friends. I am pure chaos. There's never been a single day that's the same in my life, and I don't ever want that to change. I'm 100% freelancer, and so a lot of times my writing schedule will be dependent on other deadlines for what is paying me first and next. So there's a lot of stuff that just any freelancer would tell you about the turnaround time for any given thing that you have put into your schedule will determine a lot of the rest of your schedule. And that's why I also like staying traditionally published, because while I am good at being a freelancer, I'm not necessarily good at structure outside of someone telling me a deadline. So for me, traditional publishing remains the way to go, because I have someone outside of myself to whom I am accountable. Because I will just lose track of time. I'm really not good with time. So someone else giving me a deadline is really, really critical. So first and foremost, it is, what is the next book deadline? And then what's my best practice of, okay, if that is the deadline, what do I have to make sure I'm doing word count wise roughly in the drafting process? And then I try to just keep it loosely of, as long as I'm writing every day towards that goal, or every other day towards that goal, or taking, if I have a chunk of open time, that is always writing time. I love looking at chunks of open time, because then I get to really dive in, but I can't wait for those to happen, because life will fill it with other things. So you do have to be protective of your time, especially if you're a chaos goblin like me. So the things happen in dribs and drabs and little swaths, and juggling lots of things at once, which is good, because for me, being a nonlinear, very chaotic brain, if I hit a wall with something, I have 5 other things that I can go work on if I've hit a wall with something, generally speaking.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you if you ever get blocked and how you
Yeah.
get through
If I block, I just switch the plates. And usually what I will do is I will give my brain a task. That if whatever I'm chewing on, whatever I hit the wall about, I will say, hey brain, hey subconscious, you need to fix this while I am focusing on this other thing. You need to come up with a solution, because it's usually when I stop it's like kind of like a watch pot, it's like stuff will boil when I'm not watching it. So so I feel that way about if I hit a wall with my writing. And then generally speaking, I will try to especially since a lot of my fiction and my nonfiction now have been kind of correlating, I will go spend time on the nonfiction, because then I'm still in the middle of the book.
Right.
Because I usually I find something in the nonfiction where I'm like, I'm obsessed with that. I'm going to go write a fiction about that. That's how Ravenfield Hall started. The ghost ship, the dead ships and dark dreams, my ghost ship chapter of America's Most Gothic. I'm obsessed with the setting where I walk along this nature preserve in Maine every year. And I'm obsessed with this one particular Wolf's Neck Preserve in southern Maine. It's one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. And I'm just unspeakably inspired by it. And I've written several stories set there. And now I've written a whole book set there off of this chapter where I just wandered along going, wow, this is just so rich for my imagination. Just beautiful rocky coastline. I love a good Gothic looking coastline. So any of the work that I'm doing for one is now inevitably dovetailing for the other. And it's just, that has begun to double. The tour that I'm going to be working on for Birds of the Dead is also paralleling some of the nonfiction that I want to be writing going forward. So all of it is, it's a beautiful thing in that I feel like for someone who has 5 projects going at once, at least they are all actually truly parallel. And then I just have to change the craft for one of them. Okay, this deep dive, this nonfiction deep dive I cannot do in this book, but I'm going to take this element from it and put the pieces together that way. And so I don't feel pulled in many different directions. I feel like I'm just on a very wide river with a lot of different currents in it.
Now, this may seem like mystical or magical because you mentioned that if you get stuck on something, you sort of tell your subconscious like, okay, work on this while I do that. And then when you come back to it, I'm presuming that this is your experience because it's been mine as well, is that sometimes the solution just comes just from getting away from it. It's just there. And then like this weird thing happens when I'm writing, and I'm curious to hear your experience, that what it takes me like a few minutes, 10 15 minutes to get into it, and all of a sudden it's like I'm in that world and stuff is coming out and I don't know where it's coming from, and it's coming on the page and it's really working, or at least in my head it's working, and it's like, where is this coming from? It's just like I don't know where it comes from. I'm just curious, like your experience. Do you have that where you're just like when you're working, I guess sometimes they call it flow. Yeah. So I'm just curious, like how you.
It is a state of flow. And because so much of my work is dealing with 19th century spiritualism, I consider it a bit of automatic writing. It's a little more structured than automatic writing, but in the 19th century, automatic writers would go into like a spirit trance basically, and they would be essentially taking down messages from the spirit world. I don't think it is quite that level of mysticism. Mysticism is through everything I do. My work is very spiritual and it is very connected to the spirit world, but I think I'm crafting, and I think I'm building a little bit more than someone who's just in a pure trance state. I think I'm a little bit more aware than that, but it is a zone. I call it my zone when I'm getting in the zone. And you are otherworlding it. And for me, it does feel like it is, I am being inspired by the slipstream of time being nonlinear. I do think that part of my brain is like a satellite dish that is tapped into a 19th century frequency. Not that I think that was a great time to live. It's a great time to live if you're a rich white guy. If you are not a rich white guy, it was a hard time for everybody else.
Sure.
But there's a lot of our parallels to a modern era that we can talk about in the 19th century. And it's like you're talking about today, especially right now. So I find that sometimes people can learn more about today when they're seeing the patterns that have persisted from before. And so I think I'm tapping into some of those things that are needing to be said again. So maybe it is, I do think it is sometimes very much beyond me. I do consider my work a spiritual calling. I do have kind of conversations with the spirit world in aggregate. And some people find that very odd, but if you read my work, you're like, nah, that's in there. It's just my cosmology, my personal cosmology. And I'm not here to tell anybody what to think about any of that. I have skeptics and completely non-believers who come on my tours, and I welcome them just like I welcome the believers. And it doesn't matter to me what your personal framework is for this stuff, as long as you will let me tell you a story, and then you can decide what you think about it. The only time I'll put a hard line down is if someone tells me that I didn't experience what I experienced. And I have
Yeah.
people that have left bad reviews on my nonfiction because they just don't believe me in saying this strange thing happened.
Yeah.
And I don't say that all the time. I only say it when really a strange thing happened. Usually all the rest of the stuff is like, no, there's really nothing. I couldn't find anything in this space to justify any of this paranormal stuff. So I'm
Yeah.
not rushing to say all of that, but I will have people who just automatically, categorically, because they refuse to believe that something that they don't think is possible,
I've seen some
will
weird
just
stuff.
reject it outright.
I've seen some, like, I consider myself a skeptic, but I've seen things that I cannot explain. I
Mhm.
may have told you my ghost story, that forgive me if I'm repeating myself on this podcast. I may have told it to you before, but my wife and I were upstate in New York in this town called Rosendale, and there is something called the Refrigeration Cave, and it's a natural cave. And this was a 95-degree day, as hot as it is today. And there's like mist coming out of the cave, and if you go close to it, it feels like an open freezer. And they used to use it to cool to keep their food cool in the summer. So I don't know, we found it on some map or something, and we walked down there. And as we get there, there's a man dressed in 19th century attire, um, like a wool jacket and pants, like heavy. And I was like, oh, that's kind of hot. And he has what's a correct pronunciation? Daguerreotype? Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah. Yes.
Daguerre, like one of those big cameras. And he's
Hmm.
like pointing down towards the cave, and I kind of look, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's kind of cool. And he's like, looks like he was just fiddling with the camera a little bit. And so I like walk down closer to the cave because you can actually go in a little bit into the cave, probably a lot. I didn't get that far. And then my wife says, Matt, no, no, come back. It's dangerous. Don't do it. And I turn around. She was looking at me. We turn around. Man with camera is gone. Like, not just like gone, but like disappeared. And like we walk up like onto the trail a little bit. And I was like, there's no way that he could have packed all of that up, carried it off, and disappeared in the time that we were down there. And then like other people showed up like a minute or two later. I said, "Did you see a guy with the camera?" They're like, "No, no." Like it was uncanny, and I was like, and it didn't quite sink in right away. Like at first I was like, "Oh, maybe he's just in period costume. Maybe they were doing some kind of event, or I don't know." But it was just like afterwards, it was like, was that a ghost? Like I have no explanation. Maybe he just was really fit and put it over his shoulder and walked away, and I didn't see him, and that was that. But it just
Yeah,
there
I
was
mean,
something strange about it.
that's
No,
really.
I was like,
Let me,
it was a ghost. It was a
I have
ghost.
to.
Okay.
Like
I was just about to
it's a
say
ghost.
that that's just BS. I don't believe a word of it.
Yeah. You're
No,
denying my
Because
reality, David.
no, no. I'm kidding. I'm
it's
kidding.
a ghost.
I wanted to give my own ghost. It's not even story like Matt's. It's more of an incident, which is, and I'm the ultimate skeptic about these things. But it was when I was a little kid. I was probably 9 years old, and I was visiting my grandmother's house, and I was sleeping on a cot, and I distinctly remember like hearing noises, and then looking down at I was wrapped up in a blanket, looking down at my feet and seeing the imprint of hands on my ankles. And slowly the hands moved up my legs, and then something pulled my hair. And I screamed, and everybody came. And then when I told the story, my grandmother said, "Yeah, that was a spirit." For her, it was not a big deal. Yeah, that was just a spirit. Um, but I remain a skeptic. But I do have trouble reconciling that. Other than maybe it was some sort of a dream, semi-dream state of some sort that I was in.
I'm a skeptic, but I'm a scaredy cat. If someone's like, that room's haunted, I'm like, I'm not sleeping in that room. Yeah. But
So,
anyway,
so
yeah.
Leanna, you wrote a whole these two amazing
Yeah.
nonfiction books you co-wrote. The first one was A Haunted History of Invisible Women, and the second is America's Most Gothic Haunted America's Most Gothic Haunted Mysteries Stranger Than Fiction. So, can you tell us a little bit about those amazing? I mean, you read from one of those books at KGB, and I
I
recall that
did.
Twice, I
I
think.
read from
I remember that the audience literally gasped at
literally
some
gasped.
point.
I I read from A Haunted History of Invisible Women at KGB,
Okay.
and then what I read was because I know that reading nonfiction at KGB is not something that you usually will do. So you gave me a pass on Haunted History of Invisible Women because it was the first nonfiction, but for the for the
Gothic.
the next time for America's Most Gothic, I actually read a short story that was based on my rage about something that had really happened.
Yes.
So it directly tied into America's Most Gothic, but it was about an actual grave robber who had lived with, who had stolen this woman's corpse against her and her family's wishes, and lived with it as his bride.
Everyone needs to go read this. So we
Yeah,
normally
absolutely.
record the readings, and due to a technical snafu where the audio levels were all messed up, it just that the recording was no good, which is a shame because it was one of the best readings that
I
I've
was
ever
just about
heard
to
there.
say, it's one of the best readings I've been to at KGB.
Yeah. And that's not exaggerated. Like, I'm not just flattering you. I really believe that.
That's very kind of you.
Yeah.
That I will showcase which volume that's in. Hold on, let me find it. I wrote the story for the Castle of Horror anthologies. So ripped from the headlines. This is the Frau Perchta Comes for the Count is the story I read. That was a way I was able to channel my rage about this real life incident. I had written this chapter about this real life case of Carl Tanzler stealing this body. And there's stuff about it online, so you can research that or read my chapter about it where I rage out in America's Most Gothic about it. And you can hear me tell that story because Andrea and I both read the audiobook. So if you like audiobooks, you can hear me tell you ghost stories and Andrea tell you her ghost stories in the audiobook of America's Most Gothic. But that the ability for me of getting so mad because this guy never faced consequences for just being so presumptuous and so disrespectful, that the fiction was the only way I could like sleep at night because I just needed something to come.
Can you repeat again what he did? Can you repeat again what he did?
What he did? So it was the 1930s, and he had treated this patient. So Carl Tanzler was his name. He passed himself off as a count. He said he was descended of German nobility. He was not, in fact. And he was a radiologist in Key West, Florida. And he had a wife and kids that he abandoned. And he fell in love with his patient, who was half his age, a young woman. I believe she was 21 when she passed, named Elena Hoyos. And he fell in love with her, thought that she was some sort of prophesied bride of his. He spent all this time trying to treat her. She died anyway. He visited her. He built her this elaborate memorial. He visited that for 2 years and then decided that wasn't enough and then went and stole her body and then dressed it up and put wax over it and lived with it for 9 years. And
as one does.
Until
what's wrong with that?
It's really gross is what it is. And it also was like what's so terrible about it is that there was no, if these people had been in love and she had said, I would like to be with you from beyond the grave or any such thing, then that I could understand why there was a consensual something to go forward into whatever afterworld he was trying to create. But there was no permission from the family about him stealing her corpse. So it's disrespectful to a body that could not say no. And if you can imagine disgusting things being done, they were done. And so for me, it's the audacity of a guy to sort of literally possess a body and think that it is his to do with as he pleases. And that for me is just that. So I wrote a rage-induced story about a Germanic entity from the Black Forest coming to collect his ass. Because he didn't face consequences in life. There was a trial, but because the statute of limitations on grave robbing and desecration of a corpse had lapsed, he did not face consequences.
That's incredible.
And so so for me, again, this is yet another example of the nonfiction feeds the fiction, and vice versa. So very often I'll have researched something for my fiction and there is a haunted element to it. So then sometimes I've gone back and been like, all right, now here's the real story and here's what inspired me. So these things have been in such dialogue now for several books. And I think that's just only going to continue to prove true because again, when you go on these deep dives and there's so many things and because I could only go so far within the chapter in the nonfiction, the fiction allowed for me to really cathartically move on from that process. I actually couldn't sleep until I had written this sort of personal vengeance narrative after that.
Well, I mean, the intensity of emotion absolutely came through, and it was profoundly affecting, I think, for everyone there. And it's sad that no one can hear it.
Well, I think you can hear, I believe that my first reading of A Haunted History of Invisible Women, which is also very personal, I read about 14 West 10th Street. So 14 West 10th Street is a very haunted building in New York City, which is not far from KGB. And so I read that chapter and everyone was pretty freaked out because it's a pretty freaky place. So so people I think can go back at that point. I think that
one I think we have several recordings of you on. I just meant that particular one.
Oh the one about the count. But the Haunted History of Invisible Women too. I felt like it was really fun to feel like I had people with that one too, because it was also about my own personal uncanny experiences that had happened with that particular chapter. But I don't always, if I have had a paranormal experience, I don't put it into my books unless it is correct for the prompt. So there's a whole lot of things that were not appropriate for me to put into A Haunted History of Invisible Women because it wasn't about women ghosts, which the prompt of that book is that's the focus. So with America's Most Gothic, there's a lot more opportunity to say, okay, here's these other experiences, these other contexts. I could write about the haunted speakeasy and what happened to me there. The ghost stole my money, by the way. That's what happened to me. I got tipped a $50 bill by a corporate client. And this was when I was, I was getting paid $100 a week to be a lead in a Tennessee Williams play. And I was barely scraping by. This was my side hustle at the time. So that $50 bill was like going to feed me for 3 weeks. Right. And so I tucked this bill in my back pocket. I folded it and tucked it and buttoned it into my dress slacks. And I went to close up. I was the only person after everyone had gone. And this was a beautiful ballroom floor that had been laid inside this cave. And again, this was an illegal speakeasy in the 1920s and 30s. Now it is an event venue. So it has this wonderful dance floor. It has this sort of stage seating area. That's the dining room area. There's a raised stage for bands to play. So it has this really cool, antiquated vibe. In the fireplace around the dining area, there are bullet holes in the fireplace because, again, this was a speakeasy. And so it was being run by mob control in the 20s and 30s. So before Prohibition ended. And St. Paul had a layover of what was known as a layover agreement, which meant you could do whatever you wanted as long as it wasn't criminal outside of rum running. So basically the layover agreement was you can run as much booze as you want through St. Paul. Just be quiet about it. And so this, whatever went down where there were bullet holes in the fireplace, all of that would have had to be very, very hush hush because the escalation of that, drawing attention to it, would have violated the layover agreement. So we think that the bodies of whoever was between the shooter and that wall, we believe that the bodies had to be buried in the caves. There were back caves that had been collapsed. And because there wasn't like police records of any of that because the police were complicit with the rum running. So all of that just got kind of swept under the table. So things would move in that space all the time. Lights would go on and off all the time. Things would move, shadows would move. We would hear music sometimes when nothing was plugged in. There would be figures in the mirror at the corner of your eye. So it was the list of hauntings was very, very long. In this case, when I got my tip that was at that point like a survival piece of money for me. And I went to close up, and I went to put that $50 bill in my wallet after I'd done and put everything away from my tour. That $50 bill was not in my wallet. It was not in my pocket, rather. So I, I traced my steps all over. I went back and forth throughout every space I could have been, and there was no trace of my bill. And there's no way it could have jumped out of my pocket. I had it buttoned in there. It was folded in. So I didn't know what else to do. So I did know from all of my experience telling ghost stories that sometimes the spirit world needs to be addressed directly. Sometimes you need to tell the spirit world your boundaries. And so I said, boys, and we kind of called them the boys. We didn't know anybody's name. Boys, I know that money was kind of your thing, and you probably died because something went wrong with that on that day. But I am corporeal, and I really need that $50 bill. Do you have any idea how many ramen noodles that will buy me? And I was like, please, I'm broke, guys. Come on, have pity. And I did one more lap, and then something caught my eye out of the corner of my eye, something pale. And I walked over to the fireplace, and there was my $50 bill stretched out, crisp as if it had never been folded, right below the bullet holes in the fireplace.
Oh, wow.
And so I picked it up, I put it in my bra, and I was like, thank you, boys, you are gentlemen. And then I realized later that might have seemed suggestive, putting the money in my bra. So I was like, don't get any ideas. But what ended up being an interesting thing about that is that it did actually change. And I write about this. So all of this is written in America's Most Gothic, all of these details. But it also, because I want these things to also mean something, and I do think there's a takeaway to be had when you have a weird, uncanny experience. In this case, for me, it was thinking, well, who were the boys? They're unnamed. They didn't get justice. They wouldn't have faced any kind of like inquiry. They were just literally buried and acted like they never existed. And so whoever was in between that shooter and that fireplace, that's like it's an unanswered question. And so I just started kind of like talking to whatever the spirits of the caves, like when I would be done with work. If people thought I was crazy, it's okay. I was the only one in the building. So I would just tell the spirits about my day. I would just, interact with them like they were part of it, because I realized that a lot of times ghosts just kind of want, and this is proven true in other haunted spaces, ghosts want to be acknowledged. And in this case, these guys were pranksters in this regard. And sometimes prankster ghosts are doing that because they want to get your attention, because there is something that is unfinished for them, and they do still want to have some kind of participatory, whatever is stuck in that space, whatever hasn't been able to be fully resolved or moved on, sometimes just wants to be noticed and to be acknowledged as having lived. And so that kind of changed how I thought about the spirit world in general, because I realized that the attendees who were coming to this cave were reaching out, and they were touching the bullet holes in the fireplace, and they were just so entranced with the violence of that moment. And I realized I wanted to kind of just counter that with, yes, and there was a real human body between where you're standing and this evidence of this violence. And so for me, the idea of ghost lore is also about how can we address and hopefully be a little bit more human about some of the things that we are so drawn to as a species. We're going to always be interested in the unknown. We're going to always be interested and kind of inevitably drawn towards violence, like or tragedy. We all turn and look if there's been a car wreck. Let's be real. Like and part of that is our human, threat mechanisms at work. Like we're doing that so that we try to stay safe ourselves. I know where that's coming from. But I think that being able to have a dialogue about that throughout the process of ghost lore can just make it that much more powerful. So I think that's where, to go back to something you were saying earlier, Matthew, like the gut punch that I will sometimes try to evoke in my work is reminding people that there were real people attached to these stories, and they were important, and they are important.
I know you have many ghost stories, many dozens, perhaps hundreds, and I really want to hear them all, but we don't have enormous amount of time, and I wanted to spend some time talking about your new book. You mentioned it earlier. I believe it's coming out February 27. Is that right?
It's
Ravenfield Hall.
Yep. It'll be it'll be February 16th,
Okay.
2027. I will have a launch at the Twisted Spine in New York City.
Oh, great
Brooklyn.
bookstore.
Yeah.
I will try to be there if it's a date I am around. But
That's great. So yeah,
I want to
Ravenfield Hall. It's
tell
been
us
fun.
about it.
So it's a Gothic novel. It is inspired by a conversation I had with my editor. She said, "Hey, I really would love to acquire a young adult retelling of Jamaica Inn, the famous novel from Daphne du Maurier, and beautifully adapted by Alfred Hitchcock into a film. And it's about land pirates off the coast of Cornwall in England. And land pirates were a real thing off the coast of Cornwall and also off the coast of Massachusetts and southern Maine, where Ravenfield Hall is set. So what I decided,
what can you just describe what
what
a
a
land pirate is?
yeah, it's deliberately wrecking ships. So what
Okay.
land pirates would do is that they would create fake lighthouses, and they
Oh,
would deliberately run ships aground,
okay.
and they would kill the crew and steal the goods.
Wow.
So yeah, it was a thing. It was a problem. And then there wasn't a whole lot of prosecution on these things because, folks would be beholden to keep secrets, and they didn't leave any survivors. So I just use that as a backdrop for some angry spirits. And I also, when I was talking with my editor about, a Daphne du Maurier retelling, I said, what kind of freedom do I have? And she's like, well, just use. She was interested in the prompts, the ideas of the du Maurier without it being a work for work or beat for beat retelling. It's not at all. What I'm taking is some ideas, and I'm taking and running with them. So I also infuse some strong hints of Rebecca, my favorite Daphne du Maurier, probably her most famous, also adapted by Hitchcock. So I have a very Hitchcockian set of circumstances in there too. So it's very Daphne du Maurier inspired, but I wanted to make it a distinctly American setting. So the coast of southern Maine, dealing with this land piracy idea, dealing with a haunted manor that is very much still infused with the spirit of the former lady of the house. So that's very much a Rebecca theme. But also having a young woman who is struggling financially. I've said it in 1874, the year after the financial panic. In 1873, there was a Wall Street stock market crash, and it sent the world into a huge recession. And I thought that that's kind of relatable to our modern moment, for where a lot of young people are looking around at economics and wondering, how in the world am I going to survive? And so here's a young woman in 1874 who's thinking the exact same thing, because her parents got caught up in this crash, and this already struggling family and now has absolutely nothing. So she's struggling for employment and takes a weird job at a weird house. And things, ghost stories ensue.
And why YA instead of an adult, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, I was wondering that myself.
It was one of those things where, very specifically, I had kind of missed young adult fiction. I feel like my first YA series, starting with Darker Still, that YA was just a really great venue, a first person, intimately terrifying narrative of a ghostly cabal. That is really, for me, I don't know, the gothic and a first person close young heroine narrative, I think just really goes well together. It also, in some cases, is what was being acquired at the moment. It was like, who has a slot where? And for me, because my work has always straddled young adult and adult, my work has always been crossover between young adult and adult, because everything I write is very PG-13 in content. So I have a lot of things that have already been could easily be shelved either space. So I wanted to write a much more intimate, small cast narrative. And I think you can do that in YA in a way that a lot of my adult stuff is big, sprawling casts of characters, all kinds of different, wild situations. Whereas, I really wanted the intimate haunting of three main characters in a haunted house, and nobody really knows what to think about it.
Yeah.
And so that unreliable narrator kind of feeling works really well when you're a young person in a strange place. And I also just really feel like there's a lot of parallels for young people now and young people at a time at another time of economic crisis. And so for people who want to kind of have this, feeling that is very Bronte sisters inspired, but also have it be relevant. This was a way I felt that it could be doing both things, where I'm honoring these classics.
Yeah.
I'm setting it in a time period where I have a very educated heroine who is a writer and a reader, and she's very familiar with the Bronte sisters, who had published in 1847. So I make the Brontes mentioned throughout the course of the book, and the ways in which some of the situations are paralleling something from a Bronte novel. Because there's one thing that I know about Gothic literature, is that it is very self-referential and it is very genre referential. So I know I'm not inventing a wheel here. I'm just doing it in my own way. But in paying homage to my foremothers in the Gothic, the Brontes and Du Maurier, like folding them in quite directly, felt like a way that was both kind of a nod to the genre that raised me. It feels like it's a love letter to the genre that literally is my lifeline.
Now I know Shirley Jackson came much later, but I'm just wondering, is Shirley Jackson an influence on you?
Oh, she's absolutely, she's
Okay.
everywhere.
Yeah.
She's everywhere in what I do. I think it's like, I think I will never forget the feeling I felt when I've read The Lottery in school. It's like one of those things that this inevitable sorry, allergies. This inevitable thing where you're like, oh no, when that story turns, it's like it's like alters your brain chemistry and like what's possible in a short story. And I feel like knowing about her life now, I walk people by the home that she used to have when she lived in Greenwich Village. So I think there's also an element of like knowing who she was as a person that also influences how I'm writing, because she was trying to grapple being a career-minded woman, but also at a time when she had to be tending to all of these other things. And so that tension is very much in her work as well. But yeah, Haunting of Hill House is the best short. That's the best haunted house story ever written. Every haunted house story is just trying to live up
to be that.
It's trying to live up to. And I don't put
and I was
myself
reading it in broad daylight in the afternoon,
Oh God, right, exactly. It's so terrifying. And I don't look at any of these things. I don't look at my foremothers as like, oh, I have to compare myself to them. Because you can't. That therein lies madness. My voice is distinct, it is different. But my God, are they sort of like shining stars by how I navigate for certain.
If listeners want to buy Ravenfield Hall, can they pre-order it?
They can pre-order it. The cover is not revealed yet, and I cannot wait to show you. It is one of the most beautiful covers I have ever seen. I literally wept when I saw it, because it is an illustrated cover by an incredible artist. Her name is Elizabeth Waku, and I cannot wait to share this cover. It is so beautiful and it's so evocative. And it says everything I think I need to say about that. So it's not up yet, but I promise there'll be a big online splash. You'll hear me crowing about it. But the links are all available. So it's Ravenfield is one word, Ravenfield Hall.
And who's the publisher?
It is Hachette.
Hachette. Okay.
Yep.
I'm excited.
So,
And then what do you? Oh, go ahead.
I'm so thankful for folks who are pre-ordering it, because one of the things that's a little bit nerve-wracking for me is going back to fiction after. I mean, I published shorts in the meantime, but it's been 6 years of focusing on just the nonfiction. My last full-length fiction came out during the pandemic, and it did not do well because of that. So going back to fiction, I'm a little leery, because the nonfiction has been very well received, and I hope that the fiction will be too. It's just hard to know, because you've been away from something and now you're returning to a great love, and so everybody's pre-orders will help me. It means a lot, because
it sounds really great. I mean, I love everything you do. And I just wanted to ask, before we head towards a wrap up, other than Ravenfield Hall, is there anything else that you have on the horizon? Maybe it's not necessarily published yet, but something you're working on or something that's coming out that you would like to mention?
Yeah, I'd love to mention. I have another full-length fiction coming out in July of next year. So I have 3 book releases next year.
Oh my gosh!
So
So you'll be a little bit busy.
Just a little bit busy. So I have Ravenfield Hall coming out in February. in July, I have a book called Dead Ringer coming out, which is
Mm,
a gas lamp fantasy
yes.
about a telephone operator who has a ghost come through her console in 1892 New York, and
Wow.
it is an amateur sleuth story about this telephone operator, her manager, and a civil rights lawyer who they're all immigrants to New York City. It's the heroine Lottie is a German immigrant coming to New York, just like my German immigrant ancestors came in the 19th century, and just trying to build a better life. And then she finds herself embroiled in this with her whole boarding house full of other fellow immigrants from different backgrounds, and they're all trying to figure out, okay, well, what's actually going on? How can we help this ghost, and how can we prevent another murder? So it's a very fun. It's yes, it's a romantic suspense. Yes, there's a romantic through line, and there is like lots of paranormal stuff. But it also is another love letter to New York, and it's a love letter to all the different ways in which New Yorkers come together to solve a problem. Because that's just I see that play out day to day, and also just the rich diversity of the city and how that's played out through its history, which is really, really fun. And the heroine is I call her an adorable disaster. She's very klutzy. She's very sort of head in the clouds, and that causes a lot of causes a lot of hijinks to ensue over the course of the book. And then in the fall, we should have the paperback release of America's Most Gothic because it
Excellent.
came out on hardcover, and we'll have a paperback release. I don't exactly know when that's going to launch exactly, but it will be in the works there somewhere. And then I will be shortly, at some point in the next few weeks, announcing work on an adaptation
Oh,
of Strange and Beautiful. So
wow.
this is not yet, but so this
Can you mention the medium or no?
I can mention them. Well, okay, I will ahead of because by the time that this airs, the Publishers Marketplace option agreement deal will probably be out. So about 13 years ago, I was approached by a team wanting to adapt Strange and Beautiful into a musical.
Mm.
Oh, oh, wow.
And we got all the way through to like a 29-hour equity stage reading process in New York City. It got all the way to a full script, fully drafted script, fully drafted score, and we got to a concept album recording stage. And then for various reasons, the producers had to step away, health reasons, life reasons, various other things.
Yeah.
And it just was tabled. And I kind of just thought, all right, well, maybe this is tabled indefinitely. But a couple months ago, I got a out of the blue message saying, "Hey, are the rights still available? Do you want to pick up where we left off?" And
Are we
Wow.
talking like Broadway production off
I mean, I would love for that to be the
Yeah.
case, but it's not it these days. If you're building a musical,
Yeah.
you cannot go straight to Broadway with anything
Right. Yeah.
unless you have a bajillion dollars, which we
Sure.
do not have.
Yeah.
So we are going to be in the process of workshopping.
Yeah.
The production team that I'm working with have some really wonderful connections at different theaters all around the country. It will have a regional production before it would
Mm-hmm.
ever go
Mm-hmm.
onto a Broadway. It's sort of a proving ground. So what we need to do is find receptive houses that'll be willing to stage a workshop production so we can get it on its feet, show the full proof of concept, and then it can possibly
Gee,
go
I
further.
wonder where you could find a theater in New York City that might be
Yeah,
willing to.
You know,
There's
you
so
know,
many. I'm excited. I wanna
that's
see
amazing
that.
news.
That's
Yeah.
that's so cool. It's always
it's really cool.
exciting seeing other people not only interpret your work but act it out. And I mean, I've never had my work acted out, but I've seen like illustrations of my work, things like that. So it's very cool to like to see that happening for you. I'm really excited. And it just goes to show, I mean, I sort of mentioned in the beginning, but like, the publishing industry and theater I'm not as familiar with, but there's ups, there's downs, there's lefts, there's rights. Sometimes it's like, oh crap, that's gone, that's over. Years later, it's like, no, it's not. In fact, not only is it not over, but it's going way further than you ever imagined it. So
Mhm.
best of luck to that. Really excited. Fingers crossed. Knock
Thank
woods
you.
knocked.
Yeah, it is a
yeah.
great example for people to sort of say, like, I want to be kind of a living proof of, sometimes just hang in there, play the long game,
Yeah.
because you never know what's going to come back around. I mean,
Yeah.
and that's the case with a lot of things that have had adaptations done of backlist books. And then
Yeah.
suddenly it's the new hot, but it's like, yeah, I know it was published in 2009. Now I love that I get a chance to talk about my backlist now in a whole new capacity.
Yeah.
And it's really thrilling, but it is sort of like, just stay open and stay
Sure.
open, don't burn bridges, because
Yeah.
you never know what's going to come back and
You never know.
cross your threshold again. And so that's just, I think, just being able to be open and let the ups and downs just sort of carry you along, and be ready to say yes, and be ready to embrace things that maybe you thought were done for, maybe
Yeah.
not. So yeah, it's I love being able to sort of prove that example of, you know what, sometimes things, it'll just come back to you.
I think that's a
It
perfect
couldn't happen
place.
to a better person. So
Yes.
I'm pleased to hear that.
Absolutely.
I'm grateful.
And
Thank
I
you.
think that's a perfect place to end on a positive note. Anything you want to mention before we do our outro? Anything we missed that we absolutely need to get in there?
I think we covered everything, and in terms of like where people can find me on social media,
Yeah.
I'm on Blue Sky under my full name. I'm trying to build up my Instagram. I came late to Instagram because I'd spent so much time building up Twitter, and we see how that worked out. So if folks want to follow me on Instagram, that's where I'm doing a lot of book updates as well, and we'll be doing show updates on that space too. I try to keep up with my website, so I do. I do have a Facebook page, but that's the one that I'm on the least. So if people really want to find the most up-to-date stuff, Blue Sky and Instagram are the two places that I'm on most often. And I'm trying to get better about my newsletter. So so if you go on to my LeannaReneeHieber.com, and you can sign up for my newsletter. I promise you, I won't spam you because I barely remember to send one. So,
well, we'll put all those links in the description of the podcast so everyone can find you online. We'll link to your books. But Leanna, thank you so much. This was fabulous.
It's been a pleasure, absolutely.
Yeah, and we'd like to do our outro. So whenever you're ready,
I'm ready.
3, 2, 1.
Farewell, nerds.
All right. See you next time.
Thanks, friends.
You have been listening to the Nerd Count Podcast. That's our show. But if you want more shows, check us out at nerdcountpodcast.com or your favorite podcasting site. See you next time.
Get those nerds! Nerds! Nerds!